Out to me about Ski Mom's gear check, and we can scroll however whatever's easiest. I just wanted to take a moment to introduce a little bit about myself because I'm hoping that this may be the start of an opportunity to feel like both Nicole and your group can reach out to me for more information. I am So I started back in Vermont. That's where I learned to ski. And I went to college up at Lyndon State College for a long time. As you can see, it's near and dear to my heart to identify with being a Vermonter. Although much of my life is actually in Lake Tahoe. I do get back and forth to Vermont for quite a bit of work. But my profession spans a variety of areas. So I'm an instructor at Heavenly, and sometimes I travel to other mountains to give lessons. And then I also train the instructors as well as ski patrol, resort management. And I do that both across the country and in a number of other countries. But along the way, it has been one of my favorite things to develop a niche in women's programming. And so it makes me very happy every time I have an opportunity to share with other women the chance to not have to go and hurdle maybe all of the hurdles I hurdled, but to streamline that pathway for them. So the next slide is to just share with you how much I have invested in understanding more about what women need. And what you're looking at is just a quick screenshot of a recent report where we surveyed over 9,000 women last year who all work in professional snow sports as instructors. We had a 45% response rate. And out of the 45% response rate, we had over 5,000 open comments from women who work as ski and snowboard instructors across the country. And what they told us is that gear and knowledge about gear is very important to them. So I was so delighted to hear that there was an opportunity to fill your toolbox with some information before the end of the season, and hopefully another opportunity to get you going at the end of summer and the beginning of fall. So these are the questions. I've been checking in with Nicole, and we had a great long conversation about some of the things that have been coming up in your blog and on Facebook and in lots of little side conversations. And so they're funneled down to what is the best way to store skis and boots in the off season? Why do we need to do equipment safety checks? When I should say, is the best time to get rid of gear, and do skis, bindings, or boots have a life expectancy? And what should you know about buying used demo gear? And along those lines, many of you, whether it's for yourself or possibly for your kids, have been involved in a seasonal rental program, and maybe there's an opportunity to buy out and you're wondering whether or not that's a good idea. And I should add that much of my work as an instructor has been with families, and a lot of that has been helping families become skiing families. And so I deeply appreciate all of the hard yards that the moms have been in years of being the team Sherpa, and then finally getting that opportunity to nestle her way back into the pack. And I spend a lot of time helping moms do that with a little bit less effort and hopefully a lot more fun. But a bit of that is about helping families deal with seasonal rentals. So I'm looking forward to chatting about that when we get there. So just kicking it off with one of the most common questions: what's the best way to store your skis over summer? And what you can see here, you've got somebody who's applying wax to their skis, and then you have another really close-up microscopic shot of a very white, milky, dry base in the upper right of your screen. And then below that, you have a ski on the left that I often refer to the base of your ski like palm reading. So if you were reading the palm of the skier who skied in the ski on the left, you might think that with a season of making your vehicles your locker room, that this person may have gone all the way to the parking lot several times. And the ski on the right, or your kids who will sometimes walk to the car with their skis on. The ski on the right has probably had a recent base grind. And so when we look at storing our skis over summer, you could take the ski on the left and you could put a coat of wax on that, hot wax, much like a hot wax would be what the person in the upper left-hand corner is doing. They're taking a wax, and there are different types. Sometimes less expensive, harder waxes are a little bit better as a storage wax. And when you drip them on the ski and you take a warm iron, sometimes warm is hot, so you should be careful. But when you take a warm iron, and it should be an iron that has a temperature reading on it, a clothing iron. I've seen a lot of clothing irons in people's tuning areas and garages, but you'll unfortunately you'll burn the base too hot after that, and it won't absorb wax anymore, much like a burn on your skin. But the important piece of putting a layer of wax over a ski that either has deep scratches or has had a recent base grind or facelift is that it seals in the pores and it seals in the edges from rusting. So one of the things that wax does is wax is a lot like putting cream on your face in the morning. You could put a lot of cream or maybe even untinted sunscreen, and within a few minutes it would absorb into your skin. So your ski's base actually has pores. When you ski predominantly in colder, more granular or coarser snow conditions, there's a lot of friction on the base. And so over the course of the season, your base will look much like that image on the upper right there where it gets milky white. That's a simple test. You can, before you chuck your skis on the roof, in the roof rack, in your rocket box, or in the back of your car, you can have a look at your bases. If you ski every weekend, or if you ski once a week, but you've skied in colder and colder conditions where the snow crystals are a little bit rougher on the bases, then it's more than likely that you're due for a wax anyway. So there are a lot of people who will take their skis to the shop to get what you can see on the lower right-hand side. They'll have the skis base ground. It is a little bit of a sidebar discussion to know exactly what to share with your technician in your service center if you do get a base grind, because a base grind takes your ski back to being almost brand new in some cases, but almost brand new in that there are two edges on your ski, the base edge and the side edge. You're looking at the base edge on the screen there, and those have very particular bevels. And sometimes the base of your ski may have a few fine scratches that are just fine. And so you really just need a good wax, and you may need your edges, your side edges sharpened. If you take your ski in for a full grind, they're going to redo the base bevel and redo the side bevel. And sometimes when you get your ski back, you may mistake it for somebody else's or think it's not your ski. So I'm happy to answer some questions at the end of this session or include some more information on tuning and bevels to look for. But it is good to know, because I'm looking at my own skis getting to the end of the season, and I'm wondering with a couple of them, should I get them ground now and then just put a layer of storage wax on them, as well as tuning the edges as well? Or are some of them in good enough shape that I can just clean them up a little bit, wipe them down with a wet cloth, remove any excess dirt or grime that comes from spring conditions, and then simply put a layer of wax on the base of the ski that covers the base edges as well to prevent them from rusting? So we can revisit ski storage later, because there's a few things we're going to chat about in regards to bindings. And a lot of people might think that because your binding oozes a little bit of lubricant from time to time, that it might really need to have like a cleaner or a detergent to get some of this spring muck off. But you want to be really careful, because anything that you use that's a degreaser to clean your skis before you wax them is also going to remove some of the important lubricant that's in your binding. So if you are cleaning your ski and you've had a really rough spring, and you may want to just be careful and sensitive around the binding area when you're using water or something else to clean it up before waxing. All right, and on to boots. So boot storage is pretty straightforward. I have one of my liners here that's out of its boot. You may decide that it is better, depending on where you're storing your boots, in preferably just a cool, dry area, that removing the liner means that your liner is going to stay fresh, clean, and dry over summer, versus having the buckles, while the boot stays buckled over summer, potentially compressing some of the foam and holding it quite snugly for several months before you ski again. So there are a number of things that you can do. You can take your liner out of the shell. If you're storing your boot in an area where you have other four-legged, short, hairy people that hang out sometimes, which I inevitably, that crosses my path. Fabric sheets are great to stuff in the bottom, or hanging them someplace in one of your storage spots is also great, where they're harder to access and make a summertime home out of. And then your boot shell can simply be buckled snugly so that that plastic mold maintains its shape. Is it imperative you take the liner out? No. But I find that a lot of people have actually never taken their liner out of the boot, and that the boot has never properly dried out. So if you were to take a pallet of bricks and lay it on a mattress, and for a long period of time, eventually that mattress material is going to break down. So if your boot liner is getting wet and then sort of drying over the whole course of the season, it might not be a bad idea to take the liner out, allow it to completely dry and be in a cool, dry place, and then leave your shell buckled up. And I put something that's really important on here. This might be the time of the year where you're actually saying, ooh, I don't even know if I want these boots next year. This kind of started to get a little sloppy during spring, my heel's lifting, my foot's moving around. Or maybe you've only come to be aware that through buckling the boot maybe a little bit more snugly during these spring days, when the boot does heat up and get a little bit warmer, and it's natural that the boot may feel more spacious. Or it's a classic northeastern and spring hasn't come yet. We'll see that in June, and it's stayed pretty chilly while you've been up on the mountain. I know that all too well. These are pictures in the bottom of some boot fitting aids. And this is so important because boots are critical to your connection to the ski and the snow. And so this is just what's considered a Bondex shim. It's highly, it's very firm cardboard that does not compress. And when it's placed underneath, so this is something that would go into the shell. And then when you put your liner into the shell, this little shim, as thin as it is, just uniformly soaks up extra space. So if you notice in the spring, the boot was just feeling roomy, this might be something that you consider over summer versus whether or not you might need a new pair of boots. Or maybe a few of these things are items that you consider looking into getting over the summer. This, if you know in the bottom of your boot, you've never had a trim to fit footbed, something you can just buy off the shelf. This is a trim to fit footbed because this end can be trimmed to fit your boot. But again, you may be evaluating a perfectly good boot that could be stored and used next year. And what would make it more comfortable or rejuvenate it would simply be some of these off-the-shelf boot fitting aids. So boot fitting aids come in all different shapes. This is one that I'm holding that you can see in the image. But as you're storing your boots over summer, bear in mind seeing a good boot fitter come fall may rejuvenate some of those things that have been maybe a little niggly towards the end of the season. So on to checking equipment safety and I have here what's compatible. So the first thing before getting into do I do a safety check now? Do I do a safety check later? Should I be inspecting my equipment this time of year? You do want to do routine visual inspections throughout the year, but right now it's so imperative with so many different types of boot soles making their way onto the market. You may have noticed that you have friends that have grip walk or walk to ride or touring sole, or they have a straight alpine sole. And all of these different soles, quite honestly, didn't used to exist. And now that they do exist, pairing them with a binding that is compatible to your boot sole is very important, because your binding was designed to work with your boot in a partnership. They're a system that works together. And so we're going to pop to the next slide, but I just wanted to say that whether come fall and you're looking for gear, or when we get to the side of looking at some of our demo gear and a few other things, compatibility nowadays becomes a bigger issue. So in regards to equipment safety, there are guidelines for inspecting user-owned equipment. That would be you. And I'm going to put a couple of those more specifically in writing in regards to what to look for and how to inspect it. But in general, there's 3 ways you can keep your eye out for safety in regards to maintaining your gear. And the first one is in the upper right-hand corner. That would be the amount of time this season you have logged more walking steps in your ski boots than probably ever before in your life. And so we have a short person hanging off, doing a little tailgating there in the background, and then a group clearly standing next to a parking lot. And because you have likely walked more in your boots this season, it's even more important to notice whether you have had more significant wear to the sole of your boot that has actually changed. This on the bottom of my boot, I have cat tracks because this is my new boot. And so I'm being very careful to protect the bottom. And intentionally, I mean that honestly, because I knew this was coming up. This is my parking lot boot. And my parking lot boot didn't get its cat tracks on when I left. I'll hold that there for just a moment. So what you're looking at is a very dirty sole. And that would be terrible if I put the boot like that into my binding. It would scratch a piece of the binding that's critical to safety. The other thing that you're looking at from the side is this toe height here. And that toe height can really erode with certain types of plastic over the season. Fortunately, a lot of you probably have replaceable soles. And so when that toe area gets worn, you don't need a new pair of boots. You simply need a new sole to be put in there. So just bear that in mind. That's a big piece of inspecting. You also have a calibrator check, and most of you are quite familiar with choosing your skier type. And your skier type is based on your height, your weight, your age, whether you are on skiing fast on steeper terrain or slower on more gentler terrain, and the length of your boot sole. And so a calibrator check makes sure that the spring mechanism in your toe piece and your heel piece is functioning properly so that you and your ski can part ways at the right time. And if you ever suspect that you have parted ways at an inappropriate time, and it really shouldn't have happened and wouldn't have led to injury had you and your ski stayed together, there are lots of things that happen that cause inadvertent releases. And I'll include some resources for those in the handout. But the calibrator check is has been a global industry standard since 1986, and coupled, so the calibrator being used to test the spring mechanism, along with something slippery under your boot sole that makes it part ways easier from your ski. Those innovations have taken something like a lower leg injury, like breaking your lower leg. And when we didn't have those practices in place, what we found is that 1 in every 3,400 people might sustain an injury. Now, with practices in place for routine visual and calibrator checks, as well as improving the AFD, it's now over 1 in every 40,000. So you can be a big part of keeping yourself and your family and your friends safe with a couple of routine inspections and just better understanding that testing process in general. The recommendation is that in the fall, you have your equipment tested with a calibrator, and once every 30 days of use that you have it rechecked, or at least a good visual check to make sure that everything is functioning well. All right, on to when is it time to get rid of gear? Do skis and boots have a life expectancy? So I just want to mention really quick that many of you have probably heard the term indemnification. And we all probably conjure up that we think we know what it means, but I'm going to explain very simply what that means in the world of your service center and your binding technician. Indemnified bindings mean that the person who's working on your gear is being held harmless should something happen to the person who's using the gear. Indemnified means that the manufacturer of the bindings still has replacement parts. They still service the binding, and they have everything to make sure that that binding functions correctly for you. When they say, or when a shop says, no, it's non-indemnified, it typically means, it doesn't necessarily mean you can't decide you want to go ski on it, but they're strongly recommending that the binding is probably out of service in terms of being covered by the manufacturer. And when I say covered by the manufacturer, I mean that the manufacturer is still servicing the binding and that they are providing technical information to the binding mechanics in the field on how to best service that binding for your safety. So, so it's important just to understand that at a certain point, much like vehicles and classic cars where you go searching online for special parts, that your bindings age out too. In regards to the ski itself, there's a picture in the upper right-hand corner, and it's one of several images that helps you to understand the construction of the materials inside your ski, which is much like buying a new mattress. So you buy a new mattress, you've got coils, you've got foam, you've got memory foam, you've got futons with all sorts of different cotton materials and other things that are all essentially smushed together. And you've moved enough mattresses in your time, I know you have, that you have folded some in half, or you have tried to wedge a box spring around a corner. But I bet in the moving process, you thought long and hard about what was actually in that mattress. And so eventually, your ski is doing this all day long while you're skiing on it. You might stand in a certain way, you might twist the ski might travel through different corners, but the ski's material is doing this quite often. And so it's natural that for a ski that has maybe a little bit of metal, a bit of wood, a bit of foam, a bit of glue, meshing all of that together amongst the most popular pieces, that over time that breaks down too. And so sometimes skis simply don't feel as responsive, or you might hear someone describe a ski as, oh, it's very lively. So there are certain ways that a ski could serve you very well for a long time. And I have had skis that I have never wanted to part with because I love them so much. And if they don't have a lot of holes in them, and you can mount a new binding on an old ski that you like safely because the hole pattern for the new binding doesn't conflict with the old ones. And if you still have a width of an edge that's been filed, but there's some that's left for suitably tuning the ski, then you can likely keep a ski for quite some time that you enjoy. But at some point, the materials will break down. And then it becomes a question, I was going to say, of whether you save it and make a coat rack or start your own Adirondack furniture business. I was lucky enough last year to be going through a number of skis that belonged to a program I used to help coordinate. And I found a young man up in Morrisville, Vermont, who his parents actually own the Charlemont restaurant up there. And he was looking for extra work. He's starting this big ski furniture business. And so there are a lot of people like that. There's also another place in Waterbury that I think is the most popular that would love to take your old gear and recycle it, particularly skis. All All right, this is one of my favorite slides in the deck, which is, you could think of it as checking under the hood, or you could think of it as checking your demo gear options, or a seasonal rental buyout. And so a couple of things about demoing skis, or maybe you've demoed a ski and you've actually skied it a few times and you're wondering, maybe before this thing gets bought by somebody else, I love this ski, or it's okay, or I think it'll suit me, I should buy it this spring because I'll get a better price and a better deal than if I wait till next fall. And that's a great question. And spring is an awesome time to cash in on great deals. So when you're hunting for a demo ski, it came to me last night. I was thinking, like, what's the most important way? Can I come up with a good acronym for this? And so I came up with binding, base, edge, intent. So does it have a binding that is functional and is going to work for and be compatible with your boot, right? Because we know that these compatibility issues, so you just need to double check that the binding that's on the demo ski is compatible with whatever type of boot sole you have on your ski boot. Base, what kind of condition is the base in? If you were reading the palm of the base, does it look like it's had an exciting adventure? But you could take it for a good full tune-up, and any of those scratches or burrs on the edges could be worked out. Edge, if the ski has been tuned considerably, the edge, every time it's filed to make it nice and sharp, a little bit of it disappears. So just make a note of how much edge is left to know how many times you'll be able to sharpen the ski is also great. And then intent. And I've included a little bit of a snapshot that describes different types of skis. And so, you know, sometimes we feel compelled because we see a good deal and a girlfriend says, oh, you should get this ski. I love this ski. You'll love it. And then you think, oh, maybe I'll get it. But you should really think about the intent of the ski that you want. Are you a groomed run cruiser? Are you a Jane of all terrain? Are you a moderate Marge? You kind of hang in the middle. Are the conditions good over here where your girlfriends would like to tow you for a little bit? Or do you tend to stay where it's smooth and predictable? And some of those factors may influence the type of ski that is going to make you the happiest. So when you're considering the demo ski, you're doing a good little visual inspection, but you're also thinking about what was that ski designed to do in terms of its width underfoot. Width underfoot can make a difference in whether a ski feels quick edge to edge, or whether it takes a little while to feel the edge engage and purchase and connect you to the snow. And sometimes the width of the ski overall can make a big difference if you are thinking about becoming a Step It Up Susie and adventuring into some places where you haven't been before. All right. And questions?
Michelle Klingman says, my only option is to store in a hot place. Any suggestions to minimize damage and issues? That is a great question, Michelle, and I am in a similar boat. I have a storage unit where it is not climate controlled, where we often store skis so we can make room for mountain bikes and golf clubs.
Yeah, it's funny. I was thinking, well, what's your version of hot? I actually sit in my house most of the time with like a hat and a little puffy jacket on all winter long. I need to turn up my heat quite a bit to stay warm. So, you know, if hot is that for several months, it's going to be over 80 degrees, and that's your only choice, then you probably just need to make sure that it's in an area where it's warm, but potentially has some ventilation. And you know, I know ski gear can be cumbersome. There's a difference between something staying at 80 degrees, you know, like maybe it reaches 80 during the day and then it cools off. If something was going to stay at 90 degrees, or the only place you could put it was in an attic where it was going to stay super hot, there are components of the binding and the lubrication system that can dry out. Would that kind of heat ruin a ski boot? Absolutely not. It's not going to ruin a ski boot unless your boot is close enough to a heat source of a certain temperature to heat and essentially remold the boot. Now, if you have a boot where a boot fitter has heated the boot up and then they put something metal into the side of it and they tried to expand the boot in some areas, storing your plastic ski boot in a warm area may affect the punch. We often call it a punch, but may affect how they have stretched the plastic of that boot. And so that boot might not be stretched just as perfectly in that area. But if you, I would say if you can find the least warm of the places, warm is not bad. Prolonged heat. I would think I would be more concerned about prolonged heat, and maybe there's an opportunity to check on it and see just how warm it's getting in some of these spots. I know that different rooms in houses and, like, for example, storage areas actually vary quite a bit, and they're not hot for extended periods.
Thank you. So, and then Erin had a question about what does the AFD acronym related to calibration mean?
So the AFD is your anti-friction device, and so a lot of skis have this ski has its anti-friction device. I'm just moving it a little bit closer. There's actually a different piece of black. It's actually a black belt. This black belt. Can you see that moving? Actually, and actually, this is a newer ski I haven't skied on quite a bit. And as I'm moving this across, I can actually feel a lubricant underneath it that it's slipping on. So this is that's one type of an AFD. But the AFD, it was found quite a long time ago that one of the simplest things you could do to prevent injury was in this part of the binding. We didn't used to have something that made the boot easily slip off. And it was determined by just making that area slippery. So the boot slid off better and worked as a better partner with the spring mechanism in the binding, that it was enough to shift. Actually, that was enough to shift the stats that I quoted earlier, going from 1 in every 3,400 to 1 in every 40,000.
That's huge. Yeah.
It is huge. And so this AFD can get scratched. Like, imagine you walk through the parking lot, you kind of stumble across something that sort of looks like snow this time of year before you get to the snow, and you stuff your foot in here, or you're kind of cleaning it off and there's dirt and grime. I think this year in particular, the AFD, you should know, can be replaced. And so if you have deep worn scratches, or if rubbing your hand across it feels a little bit abrasive like sandpaper, replacing your AFD would be a great thing. And then looking at your boot sole to make sure that your boot sole wear and tear and how much of this has occurred on the bottom of your boot could be tidied up.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I think, let's see, I don't think we have any other questions. We'll give it a couple more seconds. But Heidi, I'm so grateful for your time and energy and all the TLC you put into that presentation. Now, where can our members find more of you? Let's share some of your resources so that more women who ski can connect with you.
Yeah, so, probably if you're a LinkedIn person, my LinkedIn profile is probably the best updated area that highlights a lot of what I have going on at the moment. I do have a static web page that's my web designers like rubbing their hands together saying, Heidi, please hand us the material. But my website is gearingtogo.com, and it is a static page that's been kind of hovering there because I like to take on passionate projects. And sometimes things wait in the queue a little longer than they need to. But I am on social media. So I'm Heidi Ettlinger is my Facebook name. And then GTG with Heidi is my Instagram page. And so I'm if you Google up Heidi Ettlinger, the telemarketers have no problem finding me. But I am very accessible. And, I I reach out to people all the time. I'm pretty good about getting back in a reasonable period of time. And one of my favorite things to do is to hear about how I can help women make their quest with their families and their kids a little bit easier in the sport. And I was just networking with another group of women in some summer activities, and we were embracing the fact that snow sports have these inherent barriers and challenges as a gateway. And the more I just can't tell you about how excited I was to see the Facebook group that Nicole started and how supportive you have all been of each other, and the collective lifting that you're doing now being passed on to women who are just coming into the pipeline will be very important. So,
okay, we had a couple more questions fired in. Okay, first one is liquid wax inferior? Great question, Allie Bishop. Thank you.
So there is a new liquid wax on the market called Dynamic, and it's supposed. I am still waiting for a sample. Hopefully next week I'll have a chance to try that out. But there are some there. There have been a lot of innovative things happening in wax, and you should know that this rolling into this season. A lot of the toxic materials that were in wax, both fumes and for the environment, were eliminated. There's a company out of Southern California called WEND, W-E-N-D. For a long time, they've been on a track of producing those, but now all wax manufacturers have to abide by special rules for safety and precautions, but there are a lot of liquid waxes emerging. And the one thing I would say is differentiate between this dynamic liquid wax, which is going to protect your skis much like a hard wax. Differentiate that from a spring liquid wax, which is designed to make your day phenomenal for the day. Because there are some good spring rub-on liquid waxes. Not all of them are great for the base of your ski, but they certainly do make sliding across a spring surface a lot more enjoyable.
So that was one of Allie's question. She had a follow-up question about winter wax and spring wax. But yes, there are different waxes for different snow conditions and snow temperatures. And we did have a follow-up question from Jennifer Jones, who said, what is a good resource to start learning more about tuning our family's skis? And I think that may be, I'll follow up, Heidi, where we do a seminar, like a 101 ski tuning seminar, where we'd show the community how to tune skis and then how to put wax on. I think that, once you've done it a few times, you would never send your skis to, to the ski shop. You can really save a lot of time and money.
You
and
can.
a great edge really makes for a great ski day.
Yeah. So I'll just add, if you're thinking about getting into tuning, that would be a good reason to find an old pair of skis to practice on. Or a friend who you know really well, and you just sort of start to offer to practice on your friend's skis, and then eventually, with enough practice, you start doing your own skis. But I'm joking, but being only partially facetious. But it is tuning. There is a certain art to tuning. But that being said, there's so many automated tuning devices that are out recently. A number of manufacturers are making automated motored edgers. So it's a motor with a file that slides down the edge of the ski. It's very quick and easy. It's not a complete hand file job. And everyone should know how to wax your skis, because that's the best thing. You would never go all winter long without putting on moisturizer. And if you don't wax your skis routinely, it would be like sending them out to the door without moisturizer. So.
Well, I think so. We are just at the 45-minute mark, and I just want to thank you for all of your fantastic preparation and your tips. You really gave some really tactical steps to looking at those demos, to deciding whether our skis are ready to have one more season in them. And I appreciate that. And if we're lucky, we will get you back here for a ski tune and wax seminar, and maybe the early fall before you get super busy.
I would love that, and welcome any comments after this on other subjects that you populate over summer to field some of those with your group. So,
and again, this will go live on YouTube in the next day or two. Heidi's going to give me some of her materials so I can drop even more information in. And we thank everybody for participating today, and I will share in the group in the next few days, the live video as well. So thank you, Heidi, and thanks everybody for joining us tonight.